Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are going to try something a little different. Different! I'd say this is more than a little different. This is a deep dive unlike any other.
That's true. And that's because today we're bringing AI into the mix to analyze the 2024 presidential election.
Yeah, you heard right. We're talking AI predictions for the most important political event of the year.
You know, everyone's got an opinion on this election.
Oh yeah, even my cat seems to have an opinion.
But what about an AI? What happens when you feed all the latest campaign data, like all the way up to the end of August 2024?
The end of August, so basically all the latest info.
Exactly. And then we ask that AI the big question.
The big one. The million-dollar question.
Kamala Harris or Donald Trump? Who would be a better president?
Now that is a deep dive I can get behind.
To answer that question, we turn to ChatGPT,
Yeah.
kind of like having that totally unbiased political analyst. Right?
Precisely. No media bias, no partisan agendas, just cold, hard, data-driven analysis.
Exactly. So over the next 3 parts, we're going to take you on a deep dive into what ChatGPT thinks about these two candidates.
Their campaign promises, the criticisms they throw at each other, the whole 9 yards.
And oh boy, let me tell you, there are some seriously surprising conclusions in here.
Buckle up, listeners, because we were definitely raising our eyebrows at some points.
Before we go full AI, though, let's do a super quick recap on the candidates for anyone who needs a refresher.
Let's do it. So in this corner, we've got Donald Trump back for round 2.
Who could forget round 1?
Right, the border wall, those massive tax cuts.
And, of course, America First.
A familiar playbook.
In the other corner, we have Kamala Harris, our current VP.
Right, and she's been all about expanding access to healthcare, especially for marginalized communities.
Major focus on criminal justice reform, too.
Oh, and don't forget climate change. Carbon neutrality by 2050 is the goal.
Ambitious. All right, so now that we're all up to speed, let's hand the mic over to ChatGPT, starting with Kamala Harris.
First thing we asked, break down those key campaign promises, what's she actually running on?
And ChatGPT really dove into the details.
Oh yeah, it did. Healthcare expansion, criminal justice reform.
Push for carbon neutrality, and of course, protecting reproductive rights.
The whole progressive agenda.
Here's where things get interesting, though. ChatGPT didn't just list out Harris's promises. It actually looked at whether she could keep them.
Yeah, like could she actually deliver?
It's one thing to promise universal health care, but in this political landscape,
ChatGPT wasn't so sure. Pointed out to be a massive undertaking. Lots of hurdles.
then there's climate change. Harris wants to hit carbon neutrality by 2050. Ambitious, to say the least.
Super ambitious. ChatGPT basically said, okay, but let's be real about how hard that would be.
Revamping our energy infrastructure,
Changing how we get around.
getting buy-in from everyone. Can that happen in that timeline?
I mean, maybe it's more like an aspirational target. Hard to say.
That's the thing about ChatGPT. It gets you thinking.
Right. It's like, even if Harris has the best intentions,
Even if she does, there are limits on what any president can actually achieve.
especially with something as complex as climate change.
Okay, so we've got ChatGPT's take on Harris's promises. Now for the really juicy stuff.
Oh yeah, let's get into it.
What did ChatGPT think of all those criticisms coming from the Trump campaign?
Well, it seemed like ChatGPT wasn't really buying into most of them.
You mean, like, it actually fact-checked them?
Pretty much. Picked apart Trump's arguments, highlighted where things didn't quite add up.
For instance, Trump keeps saying Harris is incompetent, questioning her intelligence and qualifications.
And ChatGPT basically said, hold up, have you seen her resume?
Her career as a prosecutor, her years in the Senate,
ChatGPT was like, come on, these attacks just don't hold water.
they're baseless. Then there's the whole issue of Trump and his allies questioning Harris's racial identity, like, is she black enough to be president?
Oh, I remember that. Thought we were past that, honestly.
Me too. And
Oh.
ChatGPT wasn't having it either, called this tactic divisive and lacking in any credibility whatsoever.
He was like, let's stick to the facts here, people.
Facts only. Okay, then there's Trump's take on Harris's record as a prosecutor. He keeps saying she flip-flops on criminal justice.
ChatGPT actually acknowledged that her stance has evolved over time.
Evolved or flip-flop.
See, ChatGPT framed it as a common thing in politics, as societal norms change.
Like politicians adapt, right?
It even said this evolution could be a positive thing, showing she's willing to change with the times.
Which, let's be real, is a pretty crucial quality in a leader.
Absolutely. Who wants a president stuck in the past?
And of course, we can't forget Trump's signature move, the name-calling.
Nasty, mean, you know the drill.
Classic Trump. ChatGPT basically just dismissed these as personal attacks, though. No real substance.
Like, if you want to talk policy, let's talk policy.
Yeah.
But if you're going to sling insults,
I'm out.
pretty
Bingo.
much. All right, so we've got ChatGPT's take on Harris's promises.
And on all those attacks against her.
Now, time to flip the script.
Oh, yeah. What about Trump's campaign promises?
And how does ChatGPT view those? Stay tuned for part 2, where we dive into Trump's side of the story.
And trust me, you do not want to miss that.
Yeah. All right, so let's dive into Trump's side of the story. What's he promising this time around?
Yeah, because we all know Trump loves those big, bold promises.
Oh, absolutely. And this time it seems like he's sticking to a familiar playbook.
Familiar, meaning?
Well, ChatGPT says his promises are basically a continuation of what he pushed for during his first term. Immigration, the economy, America first, foreign policy.
And defending traditional American values. We've heard that one before.
Right. But the question is that what America needs in 2024?
Yeah, did ChatGPT think those policies would still work?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. ChatGPT brought up this crucial point.
Okay, I'm listening.
It said the context has shifted, like significantly, since Trump's first presidency. What worked back then?
Might not work now?
Exactly. It's a different world out there.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Give me some examples.
Let's start with immigration, one of Trump's, signature issues.
The wall.
Oh, yeah, he's still all about finishing that border wall and cracking down even harder on illegal immigration.
But even with all the progress he made on the wall during his first term...
ChatGPT reminded us that its effectiveness is still up for debate. Big time.
Right. Like, would it actually stop people from crossing? And is it worth the cost? I remember those arguments.
Yeah. And it sounds like ChatGPT isn't totally convinced either.
Then there's the economy. Trump keeps saying he can bring back that economic boom from his first term.
Tax cuts, deregulation, the whole trickle-down thing.
Didn't we learn trickle-down doesn't actually trickle down, though?
Well, ChatGPT seemed to agree. It basically said the economic landscape has changed drastically.
So what worked then might not work now.
Yeah. It's not as simple as cutting taxes and, watching the magic happen anymore.
It's like ChatGPT is saying, hold up, those policies might have had some impact before, but come on. Things are different now. We need some new ideas.
Exactly. And speaking of things that might need a refresh,
America first.
Trump is still all about reducing U.S. involvement in foreign conflicts, putting America first in international trade.
Which, it sounds good on the surface, right?
But ChatGPT was like, not so fast.
What do you mean?
It pointed out that America first really oversimplifies how global relationships work these days. It's not a zero-sum game.
Right. One country wins, everyone else loses.
Yeah, the world is way more interconnected than that. We can't just ignore that.
So ChatGPT thinks Trump's foreign policy might be a little outdated.
A little too simplistic for today's complex world, maybe.
Okay, what about the whole traditional American values platform? I always wonder about that one.
Well, Trump's trying to position himself as the defender of these values, right?
Right.
But ChatGPT saw through that. It basically said a lot of that rhetoric is more symbolic than substantive.
Like waving a flag without offering any real solution.
Exactly. It noted that this type of language really resonates with Trump's base.
Oh, for sure.
But it also said that it often, exaggerates the threats to those values.
So it's more about appealing to emotions than offering any real policy solutions.
That's what ChatGPT seems to be saying.
Okay, so ChatGPT doesn't sound too impressed with Trump's promises this time around. But what about Kamala Harris's criticisms of Trump?
Well, now those seem to hold a lot more weight with the AI.
Mm-hmm.
It was almost like ChatGPT was nodding along in agreement with what Harris was saying, especially when it came to, Trump's impact on democracy, his economic policies, and the way he fuels social divisions.
I definitely want to hear more about that. Break it down for me. What exactly did ChatGPT say?
Well, Harris has been really vocal about her belief that Trump is a danger to democracy, to social progress.
Right. I remember that from the debates.
And ChatGPT pointed to some pretty concrete evidence to back that up. Trump's actions and rhetoric surrounding the last election.
Like trying to challenge the results.
Exactly. It seemed like ChatGPT saw those actions as a real threat to democratic norms.
And the peaceful transfer of power.
Right. It's like, hey, pay attention to this. This is a problem.
So ChatGPT is basically saying that Trump could undermine democracy if he's elected again.
Well, it's not saying it outright, but it's definitely raising a red flag.
Got it. Okay, what about the economy? Harris has also criticized Trump's economic policies pretty harshly.
Saying that they only help the wealthy and leave working-class Americans behind.
Which, I mean, there's definitely some truth to that.
And ChatGPT seemed to agree. It pointed out that Trump's tax cuts really did benefit the highest earners in corporations the most.
And not so much for everyone else.
Right. And while Trump supporters might argue that those policies led to overall economic growth, ChatGPT was more focused on how those benefits were distributed, or, how they weren't distributed fairly.
So even if the economy grew, a lot of people were left out.
Exactly. And then there's the whole issue of social division, which has been pretty, troubling over the past few years.
An understatement, if you ask me.
For sure. And Harris has accused Trump of intentionally making things worse, like pouring fuel on the fire of racial and cultural divides.
I mean, you just have to look at how he talks about certain groups of people.
Well, ChatGPT seemed to be on the same page there. It cited Trump's rhetoric, that
Yeah.
inflammatory language he uses.
And those policies that seem to target minority groups?
Yeah, it's like ChatGPT saying, look, this isn't just about strong opinions. It's about creating a climate where certain groups feel threatened and marginalized.
Wow. Okay, so we've got ChatGPT being pretty skeptical of Trump's promises.
And seeing a lot of merit in Harris's criticisms.
But remember, it also had some reservations about whether Harris could actually deliver on all of her goals.
Right. So the big question is,
Who did ChatGPT ultimately choose?
don't worry, we're getting to that.
All right, the moment of truth. ChatGPT's got all this info swirling around. Who did it choose?
Drumroll, please. ChatGPT's pick for president is Kamala Harris.
Whoa, hold on. Really? I mean, it wasn't exactly thrilled with Trump's whole approach,
Yep.
but I thought it had some doubts about Harris actually getting things done, too.
Yeah, it did. It did. But in the end, it came down to what ChatGPT called systemic issues.
Systemic issues, like what we were just talking about.
Exactly. Healthcare, climate change, that kind of stuff. Big, complex challenges.
And it saw Harris as the one more focused on, like, really tackling those.
Yeah, more of a forward-looking approach.
Yeah.
Getting at the root causes instead of those quick fixes.
So ChatGPT thinks her policies are a better fit for the future, basically.
That's the takeaway, yeah. More aligned with, an equitable, sustainable future for the U.S.
But it's not just about the policies themselves, is it?
No, ChatGPT also seemed impressed with Harris's commitment to those issues. Her track record of actually advocating for change.
Like she's willing to fight for it, even when it's tough.
Right. And remember, it contrasted that with Trump, who it saw as more focused on, short-term wins and keeping his base happy.
So his policies, even if they're popular, could actually make some of those big problems even worse.
More division, more inequality, environmental damage, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. It's like, sure, Trump's good at rallying the troops, but is that really what we need right now?
Exactly. So yeah, ChatGPT's conclusion. Harris is the better choice, even with all the hurdles.
We even tried to push back a little, just to be sure.
Oh yeah, we asked, are you really sure about this?
So what'd it say?
Doubled down, full confidence in Harris. Based on everything it learned, she was the one.
Wow. I gotta admit, this is kind of mind-blowing. Getting election advice from an AI, who would have thought?
It's a brave new world out there.
Yeah.
But hey, it really gets you thinking about how AI can analyze these complex issues,
Makes you wonder what the future holds. So listeners, what do you think? Do you agree with ChatGPT? What stood out to you from its analysis? Let us know, because this is a conversation we need to be having. And hey, maybe next time we'll try another AI, see what it says. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, everyone.